Time for Ask the Mayor on KWBE with Beatrice Mayor Bob Morgan as we talk about City of Beatrice business. And we have several topics on our agenda today. Some of them are repeat topics.
That's okay.
We kind of retrace the ground, but it's good to get updates on things. And a couple of important ones coming up in the area, residential development. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Did want to start out with Homestead Days. Looks like better have a bottle of water in each hand, I would think, if you're outside.
You know, it's typical Nebraska. You wait 5 minutes, the weather changes. But boy, yesterday was absolutely a gorgeous day.
Yeah.
You know,
80 degrees.
80 degrees. It looked like we might get a little rain, but it kind of bypassed us. They might have stayed north, I think. Yeah. But, you know, I think what is they predicting? 100
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
And wind.
Which might actually help a little, but
it will help a little.
But 100 is 100. It doesn't matter.
Sure. So, you know, you're right. Stay hydrated. I think, you know, some of the activities will be, I think, in Chautauqua Park. So, you know, there is shade there, which really helps immensely. But, you know, those streets are going to be warm for that parade. So
it does start at 10, which helps out. If you started that thing at 2 in the afternoon, that might be a bit of a difficulty.
That would be a bad call.
Yeah. You know, one thing about Homestead Days, too, that maybe people, it kind of goes under that heading of things that you take for granted and don't see, but several departments have a role in helping out with that, because you talk about police as far as, you know, security on the route. You talk about streets and barricades, electric crews that help out where needed. And so, and then the parks themselves, it's pretty extensive effort.
It is. You know, when all the departments that chip in, it's a city event, and there's just things that have to be done, and our folks step up.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that, as you can tell, you know, I think we talked about last week that, you know, you're seeing the markings in the streets getting done, but you're also seeing the ground crews really working hard on the parks to get them looking good. And, you know, it's that adage is, for some people, we're making our first good impression as people come to town. And, you know, hats off the chamber for their organization and planning, because it doesn't happen overnight, or it doesn't happen in a month. It takes pretty much the whole year to pull off such a large event, and I think it'll be a good one.
With what rain we've had, mowing has been a constant thing in parks. I mean, you'll see a mower going somewhere every day because there's a lot of territory to go over.
It is, you know, and you know, if you get the hot weather and you still got some moisture in that grass, it's going to jump up a lot before it starts going dormant.
Yeah. One thing you see periodically before the council is, you know, the permit approvals, like be able to sell goods in Charles Park, Chautauqua Park. And then you also have the parade permit to shut down US 136 during that. Those things do come before the council, and I can't remember if this was discussed at one time, but is there any thought that in the future that might change to more of an administrative thing that doesn't need council approval, or is that because they're pretty regular? I mean, they're things coming up. Right.
The highway, I think we have to run through the council because it's part of the Nebraska highway system. As far as the peddlers and selling goods and services, we actually just changed that to an administrative process.
I see.
That came up when I think every first Sunday or whatever, there's a palooza that is in Chautauqua Park, and you know, it has to be timing in order to be able to do that. And if you miss a city council meeting, you won't be able to sell goods and services. And we said, how many of those do we deny? And quite honestly, I don't remember any of them that we've denied. So we did pass a resolution that is an administrative function. As long as once it's signed, we will then notify all the council members so they know that it was approved as well. So we did take that step, which I think streamlines the process a little bit better.
So those things won't have to come before the consent agenda anymore, and it's just they're on to other things.
Yep.
So, yeah. Well, like the meeting Monday night, 6 minutes, you'll have shorter meetings. It's almost a record. You came pretty close there.
Came pretty close, but I will tell you that July 3rd will be different, or July 6th will be different. We've got a number of items that, and it ebbs and flows, and you've probably seen that as many council meetings that you've covered. And by the way, you've always done a great job. And
thank you. And appreciate the kind words Monday night. I didn't want to lengthen out the meeting for you guys there. You could have been out there even earlier.
Well, no. I mean, when you work with a professional in your field and integrity and everything that you bring to the table, you're going to be missed. One thing I didn't tell you, my sister, who's 3 years older than me, she graduated from the University of Nebraska with her journalism degree, and she's been in journalism most of her life.
Yeah.
So yeah, she went the sports direction.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
She ended up being the women's commissioner for the Big Eight, the Big Eight.
Wow. Now that dates. I remember that.
So she got to, because she's a sports nut, and she would go to all the women's events, and tournaments. That's where her journalism degree took her. But that was. She was dyed-in-the-wool journalist person from day one.
Boy, a lifetime of stories there through all the transitions that athletics have gone through. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, congratulations to her.
Yeah, so anyway, you will definitely be missed. We didn't count how many city council meetings you've been to.
Well, I don't know. I was trying to think, trying to average it. How many do you have,
Right.
And I don't know. I threw up my hands. I said, I don't know if I want to know that many, but it's been a bunch. So, but it's been enjoyable, and it's been, instructional too, learning about local government and the ins and outs of things and how things work, and sometimes how things maybe don't work so well.
And that's one thing I have said, and, I guess we're coming up as I see different people announce they're running in 2026, kind of leapfrogging for that first, I'm going to do that, which is part of the political process. Yeah. But I think that's a byproduct when you are on a board or you're on the council, school board, mayor, whatever it might be. There's a lot of knowledge you learn.
Yeah.
Will I ever use it again? Probably not. but there's a lot of knowledge and understanding that you have. I mean, one of the biggest things, I know we're getting off topic. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
One of the biggest things that I think is hard for people to understand is right of way.
Yeah.
So like from the center of the street to 35 feet into my yard is actually city property. And the trees are on that city property. And, when Pinpoint came in and they buried the lines, even though I keep my yard, as pristine as I can, that 35 feet is still city property and can put in that internet line. So that's really hard to understand. Yeah. And it's not a set 35 feet. It is in my neighborhood, but in some of the older neighborhoods, it might be shorter or it might be longer.
Yeah.
And so as you look at putting in, for instance, if you decided that you wanted to pave a street and you put a paving district together, chances are by the time you put it in at the length and the width that we have, it may end up, and where that right-of-way is, it may change what that right-of-way is on your property. Yeah. So that's a hard concept to grasp.
Yeah, it's kind of that little bit of disagreement between private and public ownership and things. But, you mentioned with candidates filing, it seemed like they file or declare even earlier than ever before. But one thing I've always noticed that lots of times in candidates, and this is over the years when they file, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And what you come to find out, and we've seen this many times, it's all about consensus building. I mean, if you're on the wrong side of a vote, like 70 or 80 times, what good have you really done? That's kind of what the situation is. Right.
I mean, that's part of the process. You're right. Yeah, it takes consensus building, and in a lot of respects, I think sometimes you come out with a whole lot of better decision and process because you've had that discussion.
Yep. Been able to hash out things you like or don't like, but you agree on something ultimately. Right. So, yeah. Water main break. I see there's another one. What? Elk Street?
I think it's Elk Street, yeah.
They happen once in a while.
That's right,
And something for the crews to do out there.
When you think about when those were put in the ground, we're going to continue to have those for a long time just because of age. Yeah. Things wear out, just like some days my body feels like it's wearing out.
Most days, mine does. But yeah. Before we take a break here, we should note that this is designated as Waste and Recycling Workers Week, and kind of an important thing too, because in recent years you transitioned to an enterprise type of garbage hauling, and you have a great organization in town that handles recycling and environmental issues, and those people do a lot of work, both paid and volunteer work, obviously, and depending on the organization. But again, those is one of those services we all count on. We take sometimes for granted, but it takes a lot of time.
It does, Keep Beatrice Beautiful, I think, continues to be a shining star for us. And then you think about all the workers that we have taking care of waste and recycling. I think that's great. I think technology has changed. I mean, if you look at how we pick up trash today versus what we did 5 years ago, it's a lot more efficient. We're also finding that, by our recycling plan, when we went to the 96-gallon recycling bin, it now can be used by the mechanical loader. That worked well, and I think one of the things a lot of people really enjoy is picking up yard waste, and so that went to the mechanical process as well, picked up once a week. So, I think we've been able to take that technology and put in some efficiencies and run a really good operation for our trash and our recycling.
Years ago, it was common to maybe just pick it up and bury it in a place and cover it over, but even that's changed. Just the development of how waste is handled today, and you're going through that right now with a new landfill construction, which is just as, if not more, developed than the one you had, which was going under all kinds of regulations.
Absolutely, and the regulations are still there. Yeah. Like I said, the good news is that we have a landfill, and we have we have charted our own course for the next 70 years of what we're going to do with waste, because waste continues to, I want to say, almost multiply.
Yeah.
I think about, a business that probably went out of business. You don't see any small appliance repair shops very much anymore. I think the people that repair your refrigerators and those type of things do a really good job. But if you think about a TV, it used to be that a TV, you take it into the repair shop, they'd fix it, and you bring it home.
We're kind of a throwaway society now. Once it wears out, it just goes.
We're showing our age.
Yeah. Well, and that is true across a lot of products. It's planned obsolescence or whatever they call it. So, how are things coming out at the construction for the new landfill? Pretty well.
Very, very well.
Yeah.
In some respects, you think it's kind of crazy, but we have had some timely rains, which makes the dirt compact a little better and come out a little better. I think they're doing a great job. We should be ready to go by October, November, and hit our dates.
I see. All right. Back with more on Ask the Mayor with Mayor Bob Morgan in just a moment. We're back on Ask the Mayor today with Mayor Bob Morgan. Well, we talked about it a lot over the years because of revisions and things, but it's all pretty much settled now, policy-wise. Fireworks sales and use coming up here.
Absolutely.
Pretty soon.
That is coming up, as we know. I think, what is it? It'll run from June 29th to, through the 4th.
That's the discharge, and I guess the sale is the same.
Yes.
Time.
One of the things that we tossed that around.
Yeah.
I mean, we really did. We talked about, do you have sales 2 days before discharge? And I think after having a good discussion at the city council, you realize that, that's probably not going to be realistic, because typically when you buy fireworks, you're going to start using them. And the other thing is how busy do you try to keep people to track down the ones, or how capable are you going to be to track people down once they shoot a fireworks and then they're done and they go in? By the time any enforcement comes, there's nobody around to go. So I think this one has gone through 2 or 3 different revisions since I've been on the council and mayor. And so this is what, again, I think it was a compromise, because we had some that wanted to go the full 10 days that the state allows, and we had people on the other side of the coin that didn't want any. Yeah. And so
kind of had to settle in the middle there.
We had to settle somewhere in the middle. So times are a little bit different. I think through the 2nd, I think that 10 o'clock is the time that you quit shooting. I think on the 3rd and the 4th, which will be a Thursday and a Friday this year, will be up until 11:59. Yeah, could say midnight, but technically 11:59.
12 is actually Friday,
Yeah,
the 5th.
That goes into the 5th.
Yeah.
That is one of the alterations that we made under this particular policy. The old one, for some reason, had the 5th in there.
Yeah.
This does not.
Yeah.
So it ends on 11:59.
Seems like that was
4th.
just the timing of how the week laid out, wasn't it, or something?
It could have been.
Or it might have had to do with rain, too. I know one of those nights
Right.
we had some inclement weather. A lot of people would have fireworks left over. Maybe that factored into it or whatever.
That could have. But again, I'm not sure how we end up going one extra day than what the 4th was. So, yes, it does end on Friday the 4th.
Not to throw a wrench into the machinery here, but when I was reading the ordinance, I see it says Central Standard Time on the cutoff times. And my first question was, well, since we're in Central Daylight Time, does that mean midnight or 1 a.m.? Or is that something that you may have to take a look back at? Or
we may look at a correction. I think in respect to all the neighbors in your community, your block or your area, I think Central. I think 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
Is a good time to end.
Probably would have been better if you just left off Central Standard or Central Daylight and just said midnight or something like that. But I don't know. It's just a minor thing there. But when I was pulling this up off the city code list off the website, I was thinking,
Good catch.
That would be 1 a.m. instead of midnight.
But we're gonna go 11:59.
Right, there you go. Or 10 o'clock on those other days.
10 o'clock on those other days.
So anyway, the fireworks period coming up June 29th through July 4th is when the use can be use and sales. So with that differential in curfew time there. Anything regarding, I did see that they had taken out most all of the asphalt. Lincoln Street update between 25th and 27th. I'm assuming getting pretty close to paving.
Getting pretty close to paving, getting things laid out. So once again, that project, we specified directly in the contract that it had to be done before school starts. And so we want to get that done, of course, as expeditiously as we can. But we also wanted to make sure that meant it had to be done before school opens.
Yeah. I noticed, and I think I saw it on social media, but I can't remember exactly where, somebody was saying, hey, as long as you're out there, why not pave 26th there to Hannibal Park, which is that gravel road that goes off of there.
Right.
Any thought of that in the distant future or sometime, or as considered? I know it's been discussed before as to whether or not it should, but it's pretty tight quarters in there between properties too.
It is. I mean, those are just things that we'd have to analyze. We'd have to see what, again, it could go right back to what I said about right away. How wide is that road? How much land do you end up taking from the people that are on, homeowners there? There's a lot of factors that need to go into there, and I think it's one of those things that people continue to look at, but it's not in this project.
Seems like there's a couple buildings that are really close to the edge of that road there and there too, which kind of complicates it. So,
it does. It does.
Yeah. I was going to talk a little bit about summer growing season here, but I did want to get to this item on not too far from where that paving project is the Heritage Heights planned residential area where the old Lincoln Elementary School once stood before it was torn down. The thought was that the residential or the development was going to take place there first, and then Corral Crossings, which is the old paddock lane, second. Right. That's changed a little bit, as I understand.
Yes. Okay. I don't know if it changed or
adjusted,
I was not correct.
Well, maybe I've been talking about all this time and I wasn't correct either.
So, yes, we are going to start at Corral Crossing. I think it has to do with what, one of the things that this company's coming in to do is they're doing the paving, they're doing the sewer and the storm shelter, stormwater runoff. And I think the storm runoff, is a little easier to do at Paddock, if I'm not mistaken. Which I was on where they started, so I got to be a little careful there. But I think it also then allows them to jump from Paddock on some of those things and start paving, or not jump from Corral Crossing to Heritage Heights, and then I think paving can begin at Corral Crossing while the project starts working on Heritage Heights. So in other words, they'll be able to, at part of the process, be working on both sites. And so that should, at the end, mean that we're going to be done sooner.
Yeah. The initial thought was initially at Heritage Heights that you're going to start in June, but I understand that's been pushed back a little bit.
Right, we'll start in July.
July, okay, all right. Things don't always go exactly as planned, but it's hard to tell when to, contractors have to be able to mobilize and get on site, and it does take some time, so.
Right, and if you read, most of the times when we do bids, 25th through 27th was an anomaly because we wanted it done before school, so we put in the specific dates. Once you put in specific dates, typically your rates are, that project comes in higher. If you give that construction company a little more flexibility, it's a little more inviting to bid, and typically, because we had 10 bidders on that project. It usually means that, first of all, we got a great opportunity for it to come in under budget, and second of all, you're going to have more bidders. And so by giving them that flexibility, without a hard stop and a hard start date, it does help as far as getting things done at a reasonable rate.
All right. We'll take our second break here, be back and wrap up Ask the Mayor in just a moment. Have just a few minutes left here on Ask the Mayor today with Beatrice Mayor Bob Morgan. A couple of things to touch on before we close out. One of the items that was on the consent agenda, which was the agenda for Monday night at the council meeting, was a software agreement dealing with sewer and stormwater data. And is this just kind of a modernization or a company that provides, kind of a software system where you can update for easier access to records and things like that?
And more accurate records.
Yeah.
And so this is going to help us as we continue to track all of our usage and all of our sewer and stormwater information and flows and those type of things. And this one just does what the old one would give you some numbers, and there was a number of hand calculations that you had to do, which there's sometimes errors. This is pretty accurate all the way through and just helps us do a better job in our water, wastewater.
I took a brief look at that company's website, and they do a lot of this around for communities, if I recall correctly.
They do.
So
yeah, they specialize kind of in that area. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was a good move.
Yeah. Is that a little bit like, back when you went to the, the AMI system where you did somewhat along that line where you kind of modernized water, electric, so you can...
It is. However, this one helps us check flows and those type of things and doesn't help add to your bill.
Yeah. That's good.
One is the one is automated for kind of the billing process, and this one is more utility oriented.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
One last thing maybe to touch on today. I know we've talked about it in the past, just strictly from a timing standpoint. You have the project on Ella Street kind of as a demonstration, but also to kind of upgrade the condition of Ella Street between 2nd and 3rd there, that one block stretch just northeast of the Gage County Museum. Any update on there as far as the timing or kind of what that may end up looking like in the future?
I'm trying to think of if it's out for bid or not. It might be out for bid or it's very, very close. Okay. I know that James and his folks have worked really, really hard on it. I'm also thinking that there was a little bit of consulting that was done by Olson and Associates maybe on plantings and those type of things. And the design of that is really to kind of start taking a look at how we bring in a little bit more pedestrian-friendly ideas to the downtown. So when the RAISE grant and we start working on that reroute, we'll actually have a pretty good idea of what we want the Court Street corridor to look like. Give some people to say, yeah, that really worked. No, that really didn't work. Or, why did you do that? If you kind of have a whoops or you have a phenomenal thing on a one block area, at least it gives you something to go by as you start working on a multi-million-dollar project.
Yeah. Would that also, and maybe we talked about this before, but I can't remember, would that also have maybe application east up the block on Ella Street, like where the police department is, where businesses are at that intersection?
Yeah, I think the idea is, how do we work our way up? Originally, we were talking about doing this on 5th to 4th Street. But as we looked at the project, we realized that, to do the project right, we also have to take a look at the water and stormwater. and that rolls downhill. And so we start on 4th Street.
Yeah.
The water's going to roll down on 2nd Street and not take care of what we need it to. So that's why we started at the bottom of the hill and we're working our way up.
Yeah. Aside from street and landscape improvements, it does include what, stormwater or
Yes.
drainage improvements too, and things
Absolutely.
like that. So,
Yep.
I remember there was a time on 2nd Street, not far from the museum, that was kind of a difficult thing. But then when you redid that street into concrete, pretty much took care of a lot of
Pretty much
that
took care of
problem.
that. And that's one of the things that, you don't think about when you think about, the raise grant and you're thinking about rerouting the highway. Water and stormwater is a big part of that project, and where you store water that you get the 3-inch rain, you got to put it somewhere.
Yeah.
So it really helps our streets. So again, that's going to help us as we move forward, as we do 2nd and 3rd Street. I think you'll see some other. I think we had a grant to take a look at 4th Street and 5th Street there. There'll be some more things that we'll be also working on, so we have a pretty good model of where we want to go 2 or 3 years from now.
And it applies to all parts of the community. Even a couple decades ago, 3 decades ago, when there was no development in certain areas, and now areas have grown out. You mentioned the water; those things all roll off water, and they may change the pattern of where drainage is going if you don't make some improvements or upgrades.
Absolutely. And the other thing that we have done as we do our projects is we're using ourselves as a model of how it should be done. So if a developer comes in, those plans have to be approved by our city engineer, and they have to take into consider all the water runoff that you have as you develop properties, because 30 years ago that wasn't done, and there is some areas where that causes issues today, and could have been avoided had it been done a little bit differently 30 years from now.
All right. Out of time today. Thanks very much, Mayor, and happy Homestead Days.
All right. Thank you, Doug.